right, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, ordinance 24-0521, ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. To my left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. To my immediate right, Nia Garrett, staff to the committee. We're joined by members of the Mayor's office and the Council President's office. We are here for the Law Department. We have the Deputy Solicitor, Stephen Salisbury, here. I understand the City Solicitor has a conflict this evening. Mr. Salisbury, if you could explain what that conflict is and also introduce first and last name for all of your staff that are here with us this evening, including position, title, and then jump right into your presentation, please, and thanks.
Sure. Stephen Salisbury, Deputy City Solicitor. Thank you very much, Mr. Council Chair. Just as the Council Chair said, the City Solicitor has an event tonight this afternoon that was for the, I don't know how to phrase it, but it's the new Chief Judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, Judge Russell, becoming the Chief Judge, and for the outgoing Chief Judge Berdar, and that's where the Solicitor is right now. I'm going to be joined by the Chief of Staff of the Law Department, Matthew Bradford, who will be giving our presentation, as well as the Law Department's Chief of Operations and the person who really runs everything, Annika Barnes. But I'll turn it over to the Chief of Staff to go through our presentation, and then we can answer any questions that the Council has.
Thank you. Led by Solicitor Ebony Thompson, the Department of Law is the legal representative of the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore and its agencies. The department's goals are to provide first-class legal services to the city and to assist the city in protecting its residents. To that end, the past fiscal year was a success. The department worked with the administration and the City Council to enact a local consumer protection bill prohibiting abusive, unfair, and deceptive trade practices. This consumer protection law, introduced by Councilman Schleifer, permits the city to seek both injunctive relief and fines related to companies engaged in such conduct. And while our work there has only started, we look forward to working with the council and city agencies and using the law as a tool to protect the city and its residents. The department assisted the administration in several initiatives related to real estate in the city, including the purchase of hotels for people experiencing homelessness, transition of Edmondson Village Shopping Center ownership, and the Perkins redevelopment. Additionally, the department partnered with the administration on the city's procurement transformation plan. The department engaged in litigation related to issues that affect city residents. The department filed suit against Hyundai and Kia for their failure to install industry-standard anti-theft technology on their vehicles, leading to a nationwide endemic of car thefts. The department procured a monetary settlement with Polymer 80 concerning ghost gun kits, which also imposes the most stringent injunctive measures obtained to date in order to reduce the flow of illegal guns in our city. The settlement prohibits Polymer 80 from operating in the city. In an effort to obtain more information about where crime guns in Baltimore are coming from, the department, in partnership with Everytown Law, filed suit against the ATF, demanding that it be required to produce requested gun tracing data under FOIA. The department also obtained settlements related to PCB water contamination, the opioid crisis, and antitrust actions by banks and pharmaceutical companies. In fact, this past fiscal year saw the law department bring in over $8 million as a result of city affirmative litigation. The department continues to represent the city in proceedings concerning the Baltimore Police Consent Decree. Through its work with the administration and the council, the city was declared in full and effective compliance with multiple sections of the consent decree. Indeed, the fact that the city saw a historical drop in violent crime while coming into compliance demonstrates that constitutional policing and public safety are not an either-or proposition. The department has supported the administration and council in its vacant housing initiatives, including an increase in our land use staff and working with DHCD navigating the new NREM docket. Moreover, the department has been at the forefront of leveraging technology to meet the mayor's policy objectives. Solicitor Thompson is actively engaged in blockchain technology initiatives to tackle vacant housing, including a measure that was approved by the BOE in December. This was the first instance of such action by a municipality. The department assisted BSIT with the development of the city's new AI policy by reviewing to make sure it was consistent with all applicable federal and state laws, as well as city policies, and to ensure that future city contracts comply with the policy. This will ensure that the city stays at the forefront of the best practices pertaining to this fast-developing technology. Other initiatives in which we have worked and supported the council include, but are not limited to, working with Councilman Torres in drafting a resolution condemning book bans in response to a disturbing trend in neighboring jurisdictions that sought to restrict titles about individuals of color, women, and members of the LGBTQ+ community. We supported Councilwoman Porter in her efforts on deprioritization of resources to prosecute women who seek reproductive care in Baltimore. We supported Councilman Dorsey in his efforts to improve the city's ability to collect for damages to city property by convening the department and other agencies. Finally, the department acted swiftly to protect the city's interests after the tragic collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge by signing with prolific mass torts and maritime firms and filing a claim against the ship's owner in federal court. The department is here to and will continue to serve our city, and I have a brief presentation about the upcoming fiscal year. As you can see from here, the law department's mission, which I briefly touched on, and we have two goals for FY2025. That's to provide sound legal advice to the council, the mayor, the comptroller, and city agencies, and to advance the goals of the mayoral action plans and furthering the critical work and support that the city, communities, and citizens need. As you can see from our org chart, we have 5 services, and within those services sit 12 practice groups. For the administration,
You don't have PMs for admin services. They don't
Well,
get published in the budget.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the administration, the service description is to provide overall direction and control of the law department, and part of that was elimination of a vacant position to help fund positions in 2 of our controversies groups. One is for the land use group to assist with the NREM docket, and the other is to assist the PIB for legal affairs. For our controversies, this is our general litigation, labor and employment, collections, and pre-litigation claims for the city. And for major operating budget highlights, again, this relates to the creation of those additional positions. For the performance measures you see for FY25, these are targets, and these relate specifically to our labor and employment group, in which we are seeking to drive down the costs associated with frivolous claims against the city. For transactions, this service provides charter-mandated legal services essential for city operations and governance. And as you can see from our target goals, it is to submit bill reports on time, as well as to receive excellent ratings from our clients with regard to requests for legal advice. For police legal affairs, this service provides legal advice and counsel and handles all legal matters for the Baltimore Police Department. As you can see from the operating budget highlights, we will be maintaining the current level of service. And for the performance measures, it is to continue to keep up the number of cases that are resolved prior to a trial board hearing. And finally, our workers' compensation group. This service represents the mayor and city council and workers' compensation claims. Related to the creation of those positions, there was a secretary position that was eliminated. And for our performance measures, we are increasing our success rate and targeting a further increase in our yes/no cases tried and won. Essentially cases that go before the commission where we have success in litigating related to those cases. And with that, our team will take any questions from the committee.
What's the shipping line that we are in legal action against?
So there is the owner of the ship, the Dolly. I would have to double check. It's a company that was, I'll pull up their name. But the way that it works is the owners and the operators of the ship file an action in federal court to try to limit their liability. And so oddly enough, they are actually the plaintiffs in the case. And we then, along with a number of other actors that are going to be asserting claims against the owners and operators of the vessel, will ultimately be filing an action to challenge that petition for the limitation of liability. I can pull up their complaint and give you the actual name of the legal entity that we're
Is it
challenging.
Maersk?
They're one of them. I think there's actually several. It's the owner of the ship. I think it's the, a number of the companies that were involved in the manufacture of the technology that was in the ship.
Can you tell me who the shipping line is? What I'm curious
Yeah,
about.
if you give me a second, we can pull that up.
Maersk.
Yeah, it'll just take a second.
And were we
can pull that up.
the lead on that action in response to the ship-related entities filing an action to reduce their liability?
So there's a number of different parties that will all file their own separate claims against the owners and operators, and we are one of them.
Will those be consolidated, like us, the state of Maryland, Baltimore County, et cetera?
So I think that the action on whether or not to limit liability, if the court decides whether to or not to limit liability, it's going to have the same effect on all of the different claimants. Obviously, if they limit liability, it would, they're not going to limit liability for the city and not limit liability for the estates of the decedents or the state of Maryland. So there's just going to be one decision on that.
Right. Who owns the bridge? The state?
The state, Maryland Department of Transportation. And it's the Grace Ocean Private Limited is the owner of the Dolly.
My understanding is generally how this works. There's a boat, there's an owner of the boat, but the owner usually leases the boat to a shipping company, similar to if I were to start a trucking business, I might go rent, like to a moving business, I might go and rent U-Hauls. U-Haul owns the truck. I lease them so that I can operate the business.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be totally honest, I wouldn't want to get too into the details of what the ownership structure is of the various parties. First of all, keeping in mind we are sort of in active litigation here, and we have outside counsel that's managing the case. But again, just to reiterate, it's the Grace Ocean Private Limited is
The owner, but who's the shipping line? The shipping line is what I'm very curious about.
we would have to get back to you on that to kind of, I don't want to say something wrong here in terms of
When
who
can
the
you-
different legal entities are, but we
Yeah,
can
when can
definitely
you-
follow up with you on it.
Get back to me with the name of the shipping line. How long?
Absolutely.
How long do you need to get back to me on that?
Not long, I mean, we could get that.
Monday?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Perfect.
that shouldn't be.
Did the law department or external counsel consult with anyone regarding the ramifications of the city's involvement in the legal action? Specifically with respect to what the potential impact on the Port of Baltimore could be with that specific shipping line?
I mean, I don't want to get into our, privileged discussions with our outside counsel. I would just say as a general matter, as we evaluated when and how to bring this claim, I think the overall financial impact to the city was obviously a driving
Sure.
factor for whether to bring that action.
Let me ask the question a different way. Did we communicate with counsel from the Maryland Port Administration before signing on to that legal action?
I think throughout this process, we've been in regular communication with both our federal and state partners. But again, I wouldn't get into any more detail about what the nature of those conversations were.
Can I get briefed on that privately?
Sure.
Okay. Can we set something up for early next week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dorsey?
How many times am I going to get deposed in 2025?
Councilman, if it were up to me, you'd be a regular for us, so.
I like that. Look, good excuse to spend time with my friend Steven.
Yeah, no, I not.
Experience
not that
of a
I'm aware
lifetime, at least the first one. The second one was a lot more boring and brief. I don't have it. You guys are doing good work. I'll just take issue with the statement that it was Councilman Schleifer's bill. I put it in first. He just extracted part of my bill and put it in as his own.
Well, Councilman, I know that we're aware that consumer protection is something that you've been a champion for a long time, and definitely would say that there were, I think across the council there was support for that, and so
That will be reintroduced on day one of the next term.
understood, and we'll be looking forward to working with you on that.
I, for one, have not been deposed. Hope to keep it that way. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Law Department for the work that you all do. And I do want to just highlight and specifically thank you all for choosing to go it alone on the opioid lawsuit. I think I'm going to be, very careful with my words because I know the litigation is still pending, but personally knowing the damage that pharmaceutical companies and others have done to the folks that live in this city, knowing the human toll and the impact that it has had on my constituents, my family, my friends. I don't think you can live in Baltimore and not know someone who's been impacted personally and deeply by this human-made crisis. And so, I just appreciate the work that you all are doing on that, and appreciate the decision, because I think Baltimore has a very unique case in terms of the harm that has been done to our city and to our citizens. So I want to just start by lifting that up. Wanted to ask about, Councilman Costello mentioned the lawsuit related to the Dolly. Did want to ask about whether we anticipate that litigation to be concluded within the next year, sort of whether there's any sense of timeline on where that's going.
Thank you very much, Mr. Councilman. And let me just say, to start on, to your first point on the opioid litigation, I will also be very careful with my words given where we are in the ongoing litigation, but I would just reiterate, there was a lot of pressure on the city to accept some of the earlier settlement discussions, and I think as you, perhaps better than most know, I think that we have always maintained that we have a real obligation to make sure that Baltimore is really, we can never be made whole for the losses that the city has suffered, but that we are getting that the companies that are responsible for this are held accountable as much as they possibly can be. And so we appreciate your support on that, and we know how important this issue is to you. On the second question, the timeline for the litigation, I think that's just very hard to say. I think, of course, the claimants, and there are many, not just the city, the state, the neighboring counties, the individuals, the families of those that lost their lives in this tragedy, do not want to see a process that plays out for years and years and years. But it depends on a number of different factors, and I would be very hesitant to give, to try to assign any type of precise timeline on that. Our hope is that it wouldn't take that long, but, not dissimilar from the opioid litigation, I think that the city is very committed to making sure that we're getting, that our damages we're being compensated for. And so that'll be something that guides us throughout that litigation.
I appreciate that. I want to ask about one of the ballot measures. This is the question related to real property taxes and a significant cut. I think it's question H. Tell me if I'm wrong on that. It's one of the questions that folks are seeking signatures to get on the November ballot. I had sent an email asking for an opinion on sort of the constitutionality of doing a charter amendment that would cut property taxes, whether that is something that can legally be done, and it seemed like the answer was largely no. In the response that I got, I will state just for the record that I think it would be devastating to the city's finances, that we would almost certainly tip into bankruptcy and potentially receivership. But putting that aside, just on the legal question, I know there's jurisdictional questions about the state versus the city and how property tax rates get set. I know there's questions about how much a ballot measure. Could you just kind of share a little bit of the legal analysis around this question of, I think it's a 40% cut over, I believe, 7 years to property taxes that would potentially be on the ballot in November?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that, Councilman. To be clear, we have not actually received any ballot petition with adequate signatures, so I don't want to comment. There's nothing that I can comment specifically on with relation to this issue. Now, I know this is something that's been covered in the press. I'm familiar with your request for an opinion, and so I would say as a general principle, there is pretty clear both statutory and case law in point about what the role of the legislature is and what the role, what the permissible role of a charter petition would be, and that it's pretty clear that the role of it is the role of the legislature to set the property tax rate. Now, again, without an actual petition in front of us, there's not really, we wouldn't want to comment on any kind of hypothetical in this forum, but I would say that that's a general principle that we're familiar with and I think is what was conveyed to you when you requested that opinion.
Understood. Thank you for that, and appreciated the response to my query, and appreciate the analysis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick follow-up on that. I asked for the same information, got a similar answer as well. And I'm curious, so their petition is actually on their website. So you wouldn't be able to make a definitive opinion on what's on their website. You have to wait till you get it from the petitions.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the city law department, for any petition that comes in, the city law department does not actually make a determination about the legality of that petition. That's the city board of elections, which is represented by the state attorney general's office. And that's their determination as to the legality of a petition. Now, that's not to say that if the city were to disagree with the determination that the board made, would the city, of course, have recourse to potentially challenge that in court? But in the petition process, it's actually the city board of elections that would make a determination as to whether or not something passed legal muster and could go on the ballot. And they could certainly ask our opinion on that, but their legal representative is the Attorney General's office.
But I remember when we did the, excuse me, when we did the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I led the working of all the legal stuff. And the city board really just looked at form and legal sufficiency, basically, right? And I ended up getting a second and third legal opinion to just make sure it was correct. They were looking at, you know, the format in which it was, which is what, you know. So I was just, thank you for clarifying that you wouldn't really give a formal opinion unless somebody is the Board of Elections is gonna ask you for that.
Yes, if anybody asks us for a legal opinion, a formal legal opinion, we can give that.
But that's once the petition is submitted.
Well, I mean, hypothetically, the board could ask us before that. I mean, the board could ask us at any point. We'd be happy. We have an open, you know, an ongoing relationship with them. But that's correct. Ultimately, it's the city board that will make the determination as to whether the petition can go on the ballot. And then, as I said, we would, you know, have the ability to challenge that if it was that was the determination of the city.
Right, and I also remember that they had to do that before starting collecting signatures, because there had to be language that you have to show the voter who's signing. You have to show them you have to have that available. You have the little paragraph that's going to go on the ballot, and then you have to show exactly what's going to be on the ballot if the petitioner, if the signatory asks. And that's actually on the back of the thing. I'm just saying, like, it's out there. And if we're asking you for an opinion, I was just trying to understand why a formal opinion from the law department couldn't be given to us.
We can, you absolutely, and I know, I realize that Councilman Cohen had asked for that opinion. I didn't realize that you had also, but we absolutely can give an opinion on, you know, if you wanted to ask for specific language that was on the, you know, on any petitioner's website.
I did. I submitted the language that was on the petitioner's website, and I got the same answer that you did. Well, I'll follow up with you on that, but I think it would be helpful for us.
Yeah, no, we would be happy to. And again, we're always, you know, a little hesitant to sort of share a legal analysis out in, you know, a public forum like that. But absolutely, we would be happy to answer that question. And if we didn't already, you know, we're happy to clarify
I'll
that.
send you the email exchange, and I cited the whole thing. I even looked at it in the charter, where it would go in the charter, why I don't think it's legal based on where it is in the charter. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I do write laws, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to figure that out. So anyway, okay, thanks for indulging me on that. I had a very specific question about the work that the law department is doing for in-rem. I'm sure you anticipated this question. So in the budget book, so in the executive summary, under responsible stewards of city resources, it says maintains funding for, this is on page 132, maintains funding for 3 positions in the law department to support work focused on reducing the number of vacant properties in the city. These positions work closely with the Department of Housing and Community Development on the in-rem foreclosure process. In the budget book on number 1, excuse me, on page 317, it says, 2 secretary positions were abolished mid-year 2024, along with 1 accountant in service 860 and another secretary. The savings are used to create 2, not 3, 2 additional positions, solicitor positions. These positions support the Department of Housing and Community Development on legal matters pertaining to vacant properties and the Office of Equity and Civil Rights in matters pertaining to the Police Accountability Board.
So Councilwoman, I can address that. So there's 2 things happening here. So in the executive summary, we're referencing maintaining funding for dollars that were added in the fiscal 24 budget for new positions. So if we go back to the
But
fiscal.
those are for just the law department, because I remember advocating for in-rem lawyers.
Correct.
So those are the ones.
These are, there were, and there's there were additional staffing resources added in recent years, both in housing and in law, to support NREM. So in the executive summary, we're saying, hey, the positions that were added last year for NREM are being
Are still
maintained.
there, got it, okay.
Mid-year in fiscal '24, the law department did additional reclassifications with positions, and that's what's being described in the agency detail document.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying for me, I appreciate that.
Yes.
But in the presentation we just heard, we heard a couple of times that the law department is supporting DHCD in the NREM process. I'm happy about this. There's a lot that's needed to be done. I just was interested to hear a little bit more about what that means and if those, and how this whole sharing with OECR is going, because OECR and the PAB are totally separate from, and a different brainwave from NREM. So I'm just trying to understand what that is.
Yeah, so I think the first question about just in general, how is the law department supporting NREM? I think we've had, under this mayor and this administration, we know there's going to be, there has been a lot of focus on addressing vacants, on looking at NREM, on looking at, and as a result of that, we anticipate a much higher volume than we've had in the past of whether it's NREM or condemnation actions. And I can promise you it is something we've spent a lot of time focusing on. We have recently hired one new attorney. I think we have potentially two more that are coming on that are going to be fully dedicated to looking at condemnation actions. So it's absolutely top of mind and a major priority. And I think that some of the question about how does this, where's the overlap with PIB? I'm not sure with OECR and the police accountability issues. That is a separate. We did additionally add another attorney to support the BPD's Public Integrity Bureau. That's a big priority under the consent decree, is making sure that that the police department's misconduct process and ability to respond to external complaints is as effective and efficient as it possibly can be. That includes providing additional legal support. So that's what that position is. I don't want to confuse about where these different pins are going, but I know that we've recently added an additional attorney to work on the Public Integrity Bureau cases, and that's entirely separate from the additional legal support that we're pushing towards the vacants work.
So I'm just going to split the difference and say one to OECR and one to NREM, let's just
Correct.
say. And there are, last night we heard from DHCD that they're, also doing some additional hiring, which is good. But it's under Joe Krishner's shop that all the NREM activities are happening. He's my constituent. I know he'll do a great job. And so is your position then just working with them on just increasing their capacity?
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically, particularly for condemnation actions, I think when we are called on, so the HCD team is identifying the properties, looking at the ones that we're going to go after, and it's when they sort of take the next step in litigation of requiring an answer that they would be referred over to law department attorneys.
Okay, so, I see what's going on. So the DHCD is really concentrating on the NREM side, and then when there are properties that are, let's say that we're trying to accomplish, just using a block in my district, the 1600 block of Gorsuch Avenue, where most of those are NREM eligible, maybe one or two are not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And until we have NREM 2, then they might be using condemnation instead to be able to have that whole block. Is that basically what's happening?
Yeah,
okay.
That sounds correct.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I do think it's very important that, we're working on this. And then the blockchain work you mentioned, and that's something that Solicitor Thompson has really championed. And there was a pretty substantial contract approved to be able to do that work. And the idea, as I understand it, is that it would help us on the title side, right? And so that once the title work is filed and you get everybody who's an interested party, then that's forever what's gonna happen. You do not have to have 4 and 5 different searches from different company, you know, just even the, at the end of the day, title when the thing was sold.
That's correct.
So how is that going?
Well, I know that the solicitor is gonna, wish that she had, had an
I can
opportunity
ask
to talk about
her
this, because
directly.
this is something that's obviously a huge priority to her. I think the work is going really well. I think that, this just started. This is obviously the concept of using blockchain technology to address the vacancy crisis is pretty cutting edge. I think that, we're not the only municipality to be looking at this, but I think we are definitely, it's a new technology, and so I think getting it off the ground, doing it in this targeted pilot that's just focusing on the vacant properties, this is not something that we're ready to apply across the board right out of the
Sure,
gate.
it's just a pilot right now.
But I think we've been having I think this got passed at the Board of Estimates, the contract with Medici Land Governance that you're referring to.
Yeah, it was a few months ago. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that got passed, I want to say in December, and I think that immediately we'd already been having meetings with HCD, with BSIT, the law department, as well as Medici, to start to build out the blockchain ledger, identify the vacant properties that are going to be listed on that ledger. And again, I think that the potential for this, I'm not as good at articulating it as the solicitors, but I think the potential for this to be really game-changing is what makes this a really worthwhile endeavor. And, as you mentioned, it's the title. It's the amount of time it takes to do that
to do the
research and the
searches.
cost and the expense that it takes to do that research that really makes this an exciting possibility. And, like I said, this is definitely, it's a big priority for the solicitor.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate the solicitors very committed to this work, so I'm grateful for that. I just have one last question, Mr. Chair. The PAB has been very clear that they would like their own counsel. And the reason for that is because just the way that the law works, basically, I think they might need a law change, but is that the complaint comes into the PAB and, but immediately goes then to the law enforcement agency to investigate, which that's bananas, considering that it could be something, because they're supposed to be overseeing and making sure that citizen complaints, similar to the Civilian Review Board, although they have investigative powers and the PAB does not. So I was curious if this is something that you all have started to think about with the PAB and how this would go, if they go about, I haven't read the state law recently, so I should have before I asked you this question, but I want to understand kind of those dynamics and whether or not that's something that the solicitor's office would also be advocating for, is that independent counsel.
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's been one of the big issues from the outset of, the consent decree and all the work that the city has done with BPD to really change the police department and to look at, the ability of holding officers accountable while making sure that, they're getting their due process. The issue of the independent counsel for the PAB and for really for the ACC, for the Administrative Charging Committee, I think that we have been having regular discussions. First of all, this is not unique to Baltimore. A lot of municipalities across the country are having the same tension where you want to have a city entity that is, responsible for conducting police oversight, that is both a part of the city but also independent. And of course, there's always going to be tension there. I think in our experience has been that the true conflict where you would have disagreement between the ACC and the police and the attorneys for the police department about charges against an officer is actually something that happens pretty rarely. Of all the cases that we've looked at, it's not something that comes up frequently. That said, for those, unique situations where it does arise, we have been discussing with both OECR, who sits over top of the PAB and the ACC, as well as the police department, what's the best way to address this? We've talked about, the possibility of getting independent counsel, the possibility of having another attorney within the law department who's completely walled off and separate from BPD. I think both of those are viable options. I think it's, again, because this really isn't something that comes up as often as you might think, which again, I think is a testament to the work that BPD is doing in terms of evaluating, deciding to move forward with charges and then ultimately being able to sustain those charges. It's not something that's come up a lot, but we have been having regular discussions that are continuing to say, when that situation comes up, we'll be ready to find the best solution to make sure that we have an independent attorney who's able to look at that and make those decisions.
I'm glad that you've been thinking it through, so thank you. That's very important. Thanks for your time, and thanks for all your team's time and effort. I do keep the legislative team busy as well, so thank you.
Absolutely, we appreciate you and appreciate all your support on the vacants work, because obviously that's a huge part of us being able to get additional resources for that, so thank you.
Mr. Salisbury and team, thank you very much. We are now in recess till Monday at 9 a.m.
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair.